Welcome back for another deep dive.
Oh.
And this one takes us into the quantum realm. We're diving into quantum cryptography, specifically something called quantum key recycling, QKR for short.
Oh, yeah.
Someone sent us a really fascinating essay by Yorgo Schneeppert. You've obviously had some time to dig into it.
Yeah.
What really stood out to you? What's got you so excited about this?
It's a very timely topic, especially when you think about how quantum computers are getting more and more powerful. They could potentially crack a lot of our current encryption methods, and that's a little bit scary, right?
Yeah.
What's so fascinating about Schneeppert's essay is that he doesn't just explain the technicalities of quantum key recycling.
Yeah.
He actually gets into the why it's so important, why it could be so groundbreaking.
Okay, so let's unpack that a bit. Schneeppert kind of starts off by taking us deep into the quantum realm. This isn't your traditional kind of cryptography.
No.
We're talking about really leveraging the strangeness of quantum mechanics.
Exactly, and that's what I love about Schneeppert's approach. He really emphasizes how QKR relies on these crazy principles of superposition and entanglement, which might sound a bit intimidating at first.
Yeah.
But Schneeppert breaks it down in a way that makes it understandable, even if you don't have a PhD in physics.
And that's important because these concepts aren't just some theoretical curiosity, right?
Right.
They're being actively used to enhance the security of communication.
Absolutely.
And Schneeppert draws a really interesting contrast between QKR and quantum key distribution, which a lot of people know as QKD. Can you explain that difference a little bit?
Sure. So traditional QKD, it generates entirely new keys for every single communication, and that works. It's been proven to be secure, but as Schneeppert points out, it's not very efficient. You're constantly creating and transmitting new keys, and that takes up a lot of resources.
Yeah.
What QKR does is it takes those used key bits, those quantum bits, and after a really thorough security check, it reuses them for future communications. So it's like recycling, but for keys.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So not only is it enhancing security, but it's also promoting a kind of sustainability within the system.
Exactly. It's about being more efficient, more sustainable.
And as if that weren't enough, Schneeppert points out that QKR can actually be used alongside traditional cryptographic methods. He even talks about combining it with post-quantum cryptography to create a multi-layered security approach.
Yeah, like a fortress with multiple layers of walls,
Yeah.
each layer reinforcing the others. That's what makes QKR so powerful.
I like that. A fortress.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm with you on the concept, but I have to admit, I'm still a little fuzzy on how this recycling actually works. Can we break down the mechanics a little bit?
Absolutely. So it starts with an initial key exchange, much like in traditional QKD.
Okay.
Then you have the message exchange, where portions of that original key are used to encrypt and decrypt the messages.
Okay.
But here's the crucial part. The key bits that weren't used or maybe weren't altered during that communication, they remain intact. They're rigorously analyzed to make sure they weren't compromised in any way. And if they pass that test, they're, as Schneeppert puts it, recycled for future communications. So it's a really clever way to make the most of the resources you already have while maintaining that high level of security.
So it's a key that just keeps on giving, in a way.
In a way, yeah. And Schneeppert even delves into the formal security proofs for QKR, which gets a little bit technical. But the basic idea is that under ideal conditions, reusing these key bits doesn't actually compromise the security of the system.
Okay.
Because any part of the key that might have been eavesdropped on, that's removed before the recycling even starts.
Gotcha. So that makes sense in an ideal world. But of course, we don't live in an ideal world.
Right.
Schneeppert acknowledges that, right?
He does. He doesn't shy away from the real-world challenges at all. He even dedicates a whole section to it in his essay.
Okay, so what are some of those real-world challenges?
Well, for one thing, there's the hardware. You need incredibly sophisticated hardware to make this work. Single photon sources, super sensitive detectors. We're talking about cutting-edge technology here. And then there's the synchronization problem. Imagine trying to synchronize these systems down to the nanosecond. That's billionths of a second. It's a mind-bogglingly difficult task.
It sounds like a logistical nightmare.
It can be. It can be.
So where are we in terms of actually making this happen? Because Schneeppert mentions both lab experiments and real-world tests.
Yeah, and there's a lot of promising research happening right now. There have been successful lab experiments demonstrating the efficiency of QKR in controlled environments using optical networks. And even more excitingly, there have been real-world tests conducted in urban environments showing that QKR can actually work alongside our existing infrastructure.
Okay, so despite the challenges, it seems like QKR is more than just a theoretical possibility. We're actually seeing some tangible progress.
We are.
But can we break it down even further? How does it work on a practical level, step by step?
Okay, so step one, you have that initial key exchange, just like in traditional QKD. This could involve direct quantum communication or maybe using a pre-existing key to encode those quantum keys.
Okay.
And then you have the exchange of messages where some parts of that key are used up to encrypt those messages. But the important part is the unused bits, the ones that were untouched or maybe weren't altered during that communication.
Oh, okay. So those are the bits that we're actually interested in for recycling, right?
Exactly. And that's where the magic really happens. Those leftover key bits go through a very rigorous analysis and verification process. It's kind of like a security checkpoint where each bit is carefully scrutinized to ensure it wasn't compromised in any way.
Okay.
Only the bits that are deemed safe get to move on to the next stage, the recycling stage. And this is the essence of QKR. It's about maximizing the utility of existing resources without sacrificing security.
It's like a very elegant solution, in a way.
It is. It is. And Schneppat goes to great lengths to really emphasize the theoretical robustness of QKR. He actually dives deep into those security proofs, and the key takeaway there is that under ideal conditions, QKR maintains its integrity even with the reuse of keys.
Okay, so that's reassuring.
Yeah.
But what about in less than ideal conditions? What about specific types of attacks? Like Schneppat talks about man-in-the-middle attacks, for example.
Yeah, and that's where QKR really shines, because to successfully pull off a man-in-the-middle attack, you would not only have to crack the initial key generation, but you would also have to somehow gain access to those leftover key bits during the recycling process without being detected. And that's incredibly difficult to do.
Okay.
Because of all those verification mechanisms that are built into QKR.
So it's like multiple layers of defense all working together.
Exactly. And don't forget, you have the fundamental laws of quantum mechanics working in your favor here. Any attempt to eavesdrop on those quantum keys will inevitably alter the state of the system, and that alteration will be detected during the analysis phase. So QKR is designed to be fundamentally tamper-proof in that way.
So Schneppat is really putting a lot of faith in the security of this system. But he doesn't just talk about the theory, right?
No.
He also gets into the practical nuts and bolts of how to build this thing.
He does. He has a whole section devoted to practical implementation.
Okay, so walk me through that. What are the key components we need to make this a reality?
Well, you need the quantum channels, which are basically the pathways for transmitting those photons or other quantum objects that carry the key information. This could involve fiber optic cables, which is the most common method, but it could also involve free space communication, which has its own pros and cons.
Okay, so that's how we get the keys from point A to point B. What else do we need?
You need efficient photon sources. These are the devices that generate those photons, the qubits, with specific properties, things like polarization, that are used to encode and decode the information. And of course, on the receiving end, you need highly sensitive detectors that can accurately read those quantum bits. We're talking about some really advanced technology here. Things like avalanche photodiodes or even superconducting and nanowire detectors.
So it sounds like building a QKR system requires quite an arsenal of sophisticated technology.
It does. And on top of that, you need incredible precision when it comes to synchronization and stability. I mean, we're talking about synchronizing systems down to the nanosecond level, and that's a monumental engineering challenge.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, these photons are traveling at the speed of light, right? So even the tiniest discrepancy in timing could throw everything off.
Exactly. And it's not just about the timing. You also need incredibly stable quantum channels. I mean, even something as simple as a temperature fluctuation or a slight vibration can degrade the quality of the signal.
So it's a constant battle against the elements, both internal and external.
It is. And even with the best technology in the world, errors are inevitable.
Right.
So Schneppat stresses the importance of having really robust error correction protocols in place. I mean, think of it as a spell checker for the quantum world.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about the theory, the technology, the challenges, but Schneppat doesn't leave it at that.
No.
He actually delves into the real-world implementation of QKR.
He does. He talks about all the exciting experiments that are happening right now, both in controlled lab environments and in real-world settings.
Like what? What kind of experiment?
Well, for example, in the lab, researchers have shown that QKR can work very effectively in optical networks that use fiber optic cables. They've actually managed to significantly reduce the number of photons that are needed for secure communication, which is a huge step towards practicality.
That's exciting.
Yeah. And then in the real world, there have been tests conducted in urban environments, which is much more challenging, obviously, but also more realistic.
Sure.
And even with all the noise and the interference and the signal scattering that you get in a city, QKR has been shown to be effective.
Wow. So it seems like this is more than just a pipe dream. It's actually proving itself in the field.
It is. It is.
But I'm sure Schneppat also acknowledges the limitations,
Yes.
right? Because no technology is perfect.
Of course. Schneppat is very clear-eyed about the limitations of QKR, especially when it comes to range. Right now, the range is limited by signal attenuation in those fiber optic networks.
Okay.
And while those lab experiments show a lot of promise, they tend to be conducted under very idealized conditions, which aren't always easy to replicate in the real world.
That makes sense. So it sounds like we're on the right track, but there's
Yeah.
still a long way to go before QKR becomes as commonplace as, say, our Wi-Fi routers.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings us to some of the really big questions that Schneppat raises towards the end of his essay.
Okay, such as?
Questions about scalability, cost, and even the ethical implications of this technology. I mean, these are things that we really need to grapple with if we want to see QKR reach its full potential.
Those are some big topics.
Mhm.
And I think we've covered a lot of ground already.
Yeah.
Maybe we should save those bigger questions for part 2 of our deep dive.
Sounds good to me. We've only just scratched the surface of Schneppat's essay. There's so much more to explore.
Well, I'm already hooked. We'll definitely pick up this conversation next time.
Looking forward to it. Okay, so picking up where we left off, let's dig into those bigger questions that Schneppat raises about QKR. We've talked about the technical nuts and bolts, but now we need to zoom out, look at the broader picture. And Schneppat really emphasizes these two key hurdles, right? Scalability and cost.
Yeah, those are the biggies, aren't they?
Yeah.
For any emerging technology, I mean, can it actually scale to meet real-world demands? And can it be done at a price that makes it accessible to more than just a select few?
Right.
So let's start with scalability.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Schneppat talks about going beyond these small-scale tests, these proof-of-concept experiments, and moving towards these vast interconnected networks. And that's a huge leap, isn't it? What are the main roadblocks there?
Well, he points to several factors, and they're all kind of interconnected. First, you have transmission range. Current fiber optic networks, they have limitations in terms of how far they can transmit a signal without significant loss. And then you have the sheer number of parties that would be communicating at once in a global QKR network. You're talking about an immense volume of data flowing through these channels simultaneously.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you have to somehow manage the complexity of synchronizing all those systems down to the nanosecond level. That is a massive, massive challenge.
It's like trying to choreograph a global dance routine where every single step has to be perfectly timed down to the billionth of a second.
That's a great analogy. And Schneppat doesn't sugarcoat it. He pretty much says that we're probably going to need some serious technological breakthroughs to make truly global QKR a reality.
Okay, so scalability is a big one.
Yeah.
What about the cost factor? I mean, all of this cutting-edge technology, those single photon sources, those super sensitive detectors, that can't come cheap, can it?
No, it's definitely a major barrier right now. I mean, Schneppat really emphasizes that bringing down the production cost of those key components is absolutely crucial if we want to see widespread adoption of QKR.
Right, because the most secure communication system in the world isn't very useful if only a handful of people can actually afford to use it, right?
Exactly. And Schneppat goes on to bring up some interesting points about, well, I guess you could call them real-world gremlins. Things like environmental factors and technical glitches that can disrupt even the most sophisticated system.
Yeah, reality has a way of doing that, doesn't it? Throwing a wrench in our carefully laid plans. What kind of environmental factors are we talking about here?
Well, he talks about free space communication, which I mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
It has the potential for greater range, but it's also much more vulnerable to weather conditions.
Right.
I mean, a little bit of rain or fog can completely disrupt the signal. And even with fiber optic cables, which are generally more reliable, you still have to deal with things like temperature fluctuations or even physical damage to the cables.
Right.
It's a constant battle against the elements.
And then you have those technical glitches, those little gremlins in the machine that can pop up even in the most carefully engineered systems.
Exactly. Schneppat acknowledges that even with the best manufacturing processes, you're still going to have imperfections in the devices, which can lead to signal loss or other unforeseen hiccups.
It's like building a perfect sandcastle on the beach, knowing that the tide is eventually going to come in and wash it all away.
That's a great analogy. Very poetic. I think it captures the essence of what Schneppat is saying. We have to be realistic about the challenges we face, both those imposed by the environment and those inherent in the technology itself.
Right.
If we want to see QKR implemented on a large scale.
But, I mean, challenges are meant to be overcome, right? I don't think Schneppot would devote so much time to discussing these hurdles if he didn't believe that QKR had the potential to really transform secure communication. And in fact, he dedicates a significant portion of his essay to exploring the potential benefits and applications of this technology, and it gets pretty exciting.
It does. He paints a very compelling picture of a future where QKR is the foundation for a secure and efficient global communication network. He really sees it as a game changer for various sectors, everything from finance to government to defense, and even those more futuristic applications like quantum computer networks.
Okay, let's break it down sector by sector. Schneppot starts with finance, which seems like a natural fit.
Yeah.
Why is QKR so well suited for financial institutions?
Well, as Schneppot points out, financial transactions, banking systems, high-frequency trading, they all rely on ultra-secure communication channels. You're dealing with extremely sensitive data, account numbers, passwords, transaction details. It's a gold mine for cybercriminals.
And with the rise of online banking, mobile payments, the stakes are higher than ever, aren't they?
Absolutely. And that's where Schneppot sees QKR's robust security as a game changer for the financial sector. It could provide that level of protection that's needed to safeguard these vast amounts of data that are constantly flowing through these systems.
So QKR, the guardian angel of our digital wallets.
Exactly. And Schneppot also highlights the potential for increased efficiency in financial transactions. Especially in high-speed trading, where milliseconds can make all the difference, QKR's streamlined key management could give traders a significant edge.
So a win-win, both for security and efficiency. Okay, what about government and defense applications? I mean, those are areas where security is absolutely paramount.
You're right, those are high-stakes areas. And Schneppot points out that government agencies need ultra-secure channels to protect everything from confidential data and state secrets to diplomatic communications. And in the realm of defense, QKR could be used to safeguard sensitive military communications, including those crucial satellite communications that are so vital in modern warfare.
So QKR protecting everything from state secrets to battlefield strategies.
Exactly. And it really speaks to the level of confidence that Schneppot has in the security of this technology. But he doesn't stop there. He goes beyond those more established sectors and explores the potential of QKR in these emerging technologies like quantum computer networks, which are still in their infancy, but they're developing rapidly.
Now we're getting into some truly futuristic territory. How does QKR fit into these quantum networks of the future?
Well, Schneppot envisions QKR as an integral part of what he calls the quantum internet, this interconnected network of entangled systems that would allow for communication with levels of security and efficiency that are unimaginable with our current technology.
So it's not just about securing communication as we know it, it's about building that security into the very fabric of these future quantum networks.
Exactly. And he also talks about the role that QKR could play in hybrid networks, networks that combine both classical and quantum communication technologies. QKR could be that bridge that enables a seamless and secure exchange of keys between those two worlds.
It's like having a universal translator for the world of secure communication.
It is, and Schneppot really paints a picture of a future where QKR is woven into the very fabric of our digital lives.
It's exciting, but it's also a bit daunting, isn't it? Because there's so much that we still don't know about how these technologies will develop and how they'll be used.
It is. And that's a perfect segue into the next part of our discussion, which is the ethical considerations that Schneppot raises, because it's not enough to just develop the technology. We have to make sure that it's used responsibly. And that's something that we need to be thinking about very carefully right now.
Okay, so let's dive into those ethical questions in the final part of our deep dive. It's not just about building the technology, it's about making sure it serves humanity, not the other way around.
Couldn't agree more. Schneppot doesn't shy away from those tough questions, and neither should we.
All right, so we've gone pretty deep into the technical marvels of this quantum key recycling, and it seems like it has the potential to really revolutionize, well, a lot of things, finance, defense, you name it. But as Schneppot reminds us, we can't just focus on the technology itself.
Right.
We have to think about the ethical implications. And he really dives into some tough questions there.
He does. It's easy to get swept up in the excitement of this new technology.
Yeah.
But Schneppot brings us back down to earth, reminds us that any powerful tool can be misused, especially one that deals with security and information.
That double-edged sword thing, right?
Exactly.
Something that can be used to protect us can also be used against us. So what are some of those ethical concerns that Schneppat raises?
Well, one of the big ones is transparency. Schneppat really emphasizes the need for transparency and accountability in the development and deployment of QKR. He argues that we need clear guidelines, clear regulations to ensure that this technology is used responsibly and ethically. We can't just throw it out there and hope for the best.
Right. It's about anticipating potential problems before they arise and building in those safeguards from the get-go.
Exactly.
Making sure that the technology serves humanity, not the other way around.
Absolutely. And Schneppat makes a really important point about involving a wide range of stakeholders in these discussions. It's not just a matter for scientists and engineers to decide. We need to bring in policymakers, we need to bring in ethicists, and we need to bring in the public as well.
It's a good reminder that technology is not just about, bits and bytes and algorithms.
Right.
It's about people. It's about the impact it has on our lives, on society as a whole.
Yeah.
And I think Schneppat's essay does a fantastic job of bringing those ethical considerations to the forefront. He doesn't let us get carried away by the shiny new tech. He forces us to confront the potential downsides. And as we wrap up our deep dive into quantum key recycling, I think it's important to keep those ethical questions in mind.
Yeah.
What are some of the key takeaways you'd like our listeners to walk away with?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway for me is just the ingenuity of the whole concept. I mean, Schneppat really shows us how we can take these mind-bending principles of quantum mechanics, things like superposition and entanglement, and use them to solve real-world problems that have huge implications for our security and privacy in this digital age.
Absolutely.
But beyond the technical brilliance, I hope our listeners also walk away with an appreciation for the bigger picture. The challenges, the ethical considerations, the importance of responsible innovation. It's easy to get lost in the details, but we need to keep those big questions in mind as we move forward with this technology.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. Schneppat has given us this glimpse into a potential future where quantum technologies like QKR play a crucial role in safeguarding our digital lives. But it's a future that we have to shape carefully, thoughtfully. And I think we've got a pretty good job of unpacking this complex topic today. And I think thanks to Schneppat's essay and your insights, our listeners are well equipped to continue exploring this fascinating field. So for anyone listening who's feeling inspired to delve deeper into the world of quantum cryptography, I say go for it. The future is quantum, and it's up to all of us to shape it responsibly.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.